Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Connor Mercer, and this is Connor Collects. I discuss the history of gaming, my thoughts on said history, and my experiences collecting video games. Today, we're going to be talking about all of the SpongeBob games, at least on console and handheld. I say that for two reasons. First, I don't have any SpongeBob PC games. Secondly, aside from a few stragglers, most SpongeBob games released before SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated were console exclusives. There are a couple exceptions, of course. PC platforms, almost always exclusively Windows, got quote-unquote ports of the console games. However, these versions, like the Game Boy Advance versions, were usually much different than the console counterparts. It was not until Rehydrated in 2020 that the console and PC releases were the same. But I digress. The olden days of SpongeBob games go all the way back to 2000 when SpongeBob appeared in Nicktoons Racing on the PlayStation 1. It all went downhill from there. SpongeBob's first solo outing was in 2001's Legend of the Lost Spatula, exclusively released for Game Boy Color. A 2D platformer, Legend of the Lost Spatula follows SpongeBob as he sets out to find the lost spatula. That's pretty much the extent of it. It would take a comically long time to go over every single SpongeBob game ever released, so we're just going to talk about the ones I have. In 2001, THQ released SpongeBob SquarePants Super Sponge on PlayStation 1 and Game Boy Advance. It is another 2D platformer, albeit a much better one than Lost Spatula, about SpongeBob trying to gather ingredients for a sandwich for Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. There are a few differences between the GBA and PlayStation 1 versions. The two that come to mind are graphics, saving your progress, and health. In the PS1 version, you lose health like Sonic the Hedgehog. You collect golden spatulas and one hit scatters them all around you. If you take a hit with 0 spatulas, you're dead. In the GBA port, you have a standard health meter starting at 100. I got Super Sponge on the Game Boy Advance all the way back in 2020. My specific copy is a loose cartridge that's contained in one of those 2-in-1 combo packs. Don't worry, sports fans, we're going to get to the second game momentarily. Meanwhile, I got my PlayStation 1 copy of Super Sponge around 2021. It's actually a complete in-box copy. A lot of my older games, especially cartridges, were loose without the box. But as you'll soon notice with my SpongeBob games, a lot of these are actually complete, which is something I'm quite proud of. Moving on, we have Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. I have been told that the console version of this game, released on PlayStation 2 and GameCube in 2002, is one of the worst video games ever made. But the Game Boy Advance version, on my aforementioned 2-for-1 cartridge, isn't bad. You may have realized by now that all of these Game Boy games are 2D platformers. This is because the Game Boy Advance cannot, and never will, be able to handle 3D graphics. After the disastrous console versions and decent handheld version of SpongeBob Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, gamers were bestowed upon them the most legendary, bizarre, fun-filled game of all time, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Battle for Bikini Bottom is a 3D platformer released for PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. Plankton, in another attempt to steal the Krabby Patty formula, builds an army of robots using a giant machine called the Duplicatotron 3000. His master plan has one Achilles heel, however. He left the obey switch set to no. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy team up to rid the town of these violent and sociopathic robot invaders. SpongeBob can smack robots with his bubble wand, Patrick can crush them with his mountainous weight, and Sandy can chop, kick, and even lasso them. Later in the game, SpongeBob will also gain new and exciting abilities, such as the bowling ball and a surface-to-air guided cruise missile. The terrific trio traverse Bikini Bottom, defeating robots and collecting golden spatulas, of which 100 are scattered throughout the game. Collect enough from any area and you'll open toll booths, allowing you to move on to the next. There are also 5 boss fights, the last of which actually contains 2 segments. Very reminiscent of early 3D Mario, Battle for Bikini Bottom might just be one of the best games ever made. It also has a Game Boy Advance version. Released at the same time as its console brethren, Battle for Bikini Bottom on GBA is a 2D platformer with largely the same plot and general structure. While nowhere near as perfect as the 3D game it strives to copy, it's a half-decent game in its own right. Playing exclusively as SpongeBob, you traverse the town collecting golden spatulas and even some scattered Krabby Patties. You are required to find all 3 golden spatulas per level, but if you find all 20 optional Krabby Patties, you're rewarded with a bonus level. Beating the bonus level nets you a neat picture, a screenshot from the show. As a kid, I lived for Battle for Bikini Bottom both on PlayStation 2 and Game Boy. We've had the PS2 copy for as long as I can remember, and the same can be said about the GBA copy. My GBA copy is actually yet another 2-in-1, the first I've ever had, bundled alongside a game called Nicktoons Freeze Frame Frenzy. Freeze Frame Frenzy is an okay game, but I didn't usually pay much mind to it. If I was playing this cartridge, 99% of the time it was for Battle for Bikini Bottom. Around maybe age 10, I was visiting my aunt when I noticed something fantastic. A copy of the GameCube version was just sitting there on the shelf unnoticed. It had never even occurred to me that there was a GameCube version. A quick inspection of the box and manual immediately revealed to me that it was identical to the PlayStation 2 version, but the urge to replay the game all over again hit right then and there. My aunt noticed me oogling the game and told me that my cousins didn't play it, so I could have it. Shout out to Aunt Deb. You rock. A few years down the line, once I really started to get into collecting, I was searching through eBay for a boxed copy of Battle for Bikini Bottom on GBA. I liked the 2-in-1 pack, yes, but I wanted to have the standalone copy on the shelf. While scouring eBay in the year of our Lord 2020, during the bowels of COVID lockdowns, I noticed an absolutely perfect listing. For just $30, someone was selling boxed copies of Battle for Bikini Bottom and Atlantis Squarpantis, as well as a loose cartridge containing the 2-in-1 pack for Revenge of the Flying Dutchman and Super Sponge. Without a moment to lose, I grabbed my dad's credit card, furiously typed in the numbers, ordered my games, and threw $30 in cash at him, declaring, "Thanks for the credit card." We've talked about Battle for Bikini Bottom and the 2-in-1 pack, but we'll fly to Atlantis in just a minute. Moving on, we have another legendary adventure, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game. Most people know about the 3D console version, but since I actually grew up with the Game Boy version instead, we'll start there. Released in 2004, the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the game, was released to tie in with the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the movie. The Game Boy Advance version is another game I've had for as long as I can remember. A 2D platformer, SpongeBob and Patrick journey to the dangerous city of Memphis, dangerous city of Shell City to recover King Neptune's stolen crown. Of the handheld versions of SpongeBob games, this one is probably the best. It's a similar story with the console version released on PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. A 3D platformer, SpongeBob and Patrick journey to the dangerous city of Detroit, dangerous city of Shell City to recover King Neptune's stolen crown. Similarly to Battle for Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob and Patrick both have unique abilities. SpongeBob's arsenal remains largely the same, albeit with a different can of paint. The bubble wand is replaced with karate gloves, and the G-Tam has been replaced with a rock solo soundwave. Patrick, meanwhile, now has the ability to cartwheel, which, in addition to being absolutely fucking hilarious, is also a great method of transportation. You're assisted by Scarlett Johansson. You're assisted by Mindy, who grants you abilities as you progress through the game. Similarly to Battle for Bikini Bottom, you collect golden spatulas. You collect Goofy Goober tokens. More tokens means you progress further and further through the game. The movie game is a lot more linear than its predecessor. Instead of 8 or so spatulas scattered around the world, there's one main Goofy Goober token per level with a couple of extras scattered around. This usually means backtracking. As I've said before, I got the movie game on Game Boy as a kid long before I remember buying it. I didn't have the console version in any form, however, until about 10 years ago. My dad ordered the GameCube version for me on some website I don't remember for a price I don't have written down on a date I didn't record. 90% of my library has a receipt or email of some kind to help me corroborate my memories. But since my dad ordered this one, I have nowhere to look. Please take my word for it. Or don't. What I can tell you in depth, however, is how I got the Xbox version. A few years back, I was visiting my friend Jacob, also a collector, to play some Mario. At some point, he was showing off his collection, and I noticed in a sea of Wii games a single Xbox game, the SpongeBob movie. He no longer had an Xbox 360, which can play about half of the original Xbox library, including this game, so he sold it to me for about $20. Did he? I actually can't remember. My VG Collect says $0, which either means I typed in $0 or forgot to add 20. He may have given it to me as a birthday gift, except I also forgot to add the date. Anyway, shout out to Jacob, he's cool. Moving on. Speaking of Xbox, we have Lights, Camera, Pants, a party game released for Xbox, PS2, and GameCube. A number of years back, relatively early in my collecting days, I got the GameCube version. According to both VG Collect and my many bins and shelves, I no longer have the GameCube version. I do, however, have the Xbox version. You can pick from most of the SpongeBob cast and partake in Mario Party-esque minigames. No boards, though. Unfortunately, my friends are busy 99% of the time, so I haven't played much of this. It's an okay game in single player, but by God, I'm gonna try it in multiplayer one day. Next on the list is the utter masterpiece Creature from the Krusty Krab. Released in 2006 for PS2, GameCube, and Wii, you play as SpongeBob, Patrick, and Plankton as you navigate formidable nightmares and dreams. Unlike Battle or the movie game, there's no major collectible to be found. Just beat the level. There are other small collectibles, though, like the Sleepy Seeds. Collect all Patrick's Sleepy Seeds to play as Patrick in the final level, and collect all Plankton's Sleepy Seeds to play as Plankton in the final level. I have never done either. SpongeBob's levels range from platforming to driving. Patrick's levels are beat-em-up platformers with the occasional flying rocket levels. Plankton's levels start out as 2D runners and eventually morph into monster movies starring yourself. I grew up with the PS2 version, but a couple of years back I went and got the Wii version as well. The PS2 and GameCube versions are identical. They both use your standard run-of-the-mill controller. The Wii version, however, uses the Wii Remote and Nunchuck with motion controls. Simple things like turning a crank become a lot harder when you're forced to literally fling the Wii Remote like a crank. There are also handheld versions. In addition to the Game Boy Advance version, which I do not have, there's also a Nintendo DS version. In the DS version, SpongeBob is controlled exclusively with the touchscreen like an early iPhone game. I do not like this version. The only reason I have the DS version at all is because I had it as a kid. And then one day I noticed I didn't have it anymore. Did I lose it? Trade it to GameStop for 62 cents? The world may never know. I do know that I bought my replacement copy in 2021. Next on the list is SpongeBob Atlantis Squarepantis. Released in 2007 for the PlayStation 2, Wii, Game Boy Advance, and DS, Atlantis' 3 versions are all distinct from one another. The PS2 and Wii versions are a minigame collection not entirely unlike Lights Camera Pants. However, unlike Lights Camera Pants, Atlantis Squarepantis is a single-player game. There are puzzle platform levels, first-person shooter levels, rhythm levels, and tank levels. Each level stars a different character or characters. But the first-person shooter levels are Patrick with a camera, and Sandy with Squidward LARPing as a shotgun. The tank levels are exclusively Plankton. I had the Wii version growing up, and the pointer controls actually feel quite at home here. Using the Wii remote like a gun to shoot the Squidward gun is actually pretty fun. I don't have the PS2 version, but from what I've seen, you have to use the thumbstick like an artificial mouse, and it doesn't look very fun at all. I also grew up with the GBA and DS versions. The GBA version is yet another 2D platformer. Join SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and Sandy as they make their way to and through Atlantis. The DS version, made by the same studio, is actually a 3D platformer. It has the same structure and layout, except all of the 2D levels have been replaced with 3D levels. Having played both, I think I prefer the GBA version. Another fantastic game I had growing up was Drawn to Life SpongeBob Edition. Patrick has unwittingly resurrected Doodlebob, and it's up to you to stop him. You can draw just about everything in this world, from yourself, to weapons, to houses, to furniture, to cars. I've dumped countless hours into this game as a kid. It's probably one of my favorite DS games. As you traverse this 2D platformer and draw your tools and items, you also rescue SpongeBob and friends. As more and more Bikini Bottomites are rescued, the town overworld will increasingly become more populated. Remember Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game? The geniuses behind those two games made one last game to cap off their trilogy. Truth or Square. Based on the mediocre TV special, Truth or Square was released on Wii and Xbox 360 with separate handheld versions for the DS and PSP. I grew up with the Wii and DS versions, so we'll start there. The console versions are identical aside from a massive graphics boost on 360. You play as SpongeBob, and after forgetting where he left the Krabby Patty formula, Plankton helps him to remember by digging through his subconscious. SpongeBob and Plankton venture through SpongeBob's memories, which make up reimagined scenes from the show. In one level, you're jellyfishing with Patrick. In another, you're making your way through the night shift as Squidward tells the story of the hash-slinging slasher. The Wii version has motion controls, but don't fret. You can actually use an actual, real controller on this game. Pick your poison. The GameCube controller and Wii Classic controller are both great options for any game that supports them. Since the Wii U doesn't have a GameCube controller port, I use the Classic controller. The DS version is similar in structure to the DS version of Atlantis Squarepantis. You traverse the world of SpongeBob's memories in quite a similar way. Unlike Atlantis DS, Truth or Square DS wasn't very memorable to me as a kid, and nothing quite sticks out to me. In more recent years, I've also acquired the PSP and Xbox 360 versions. The PSP version is actually just a port of the console version with some caveats. There are a few bugs, but there are also a few extra levels. It's not a bad port, but I only ever played out of sheer boredom. Meanwhile, the Xbox 360 version is the best way to play the game. HD graphics, the best controller of any version, and it's supported on the newest Xbox consoles via backwards compatibility, which means it's also the easiest version to get in current year. SpongeBob's Boating Bash, released in 2010 for the DS and Wii. I grew up with the DS version. It is an overhead racing / demolition derby game that controls not entirely differently to Grand Theft Auto 1 and Cars for GBA. In yet another vain attempt to get his license, SpongeBob teams up with alleged driving instructor and renowned insurance fraudster Seymour Scales, who teaches him the 5 essentials: destruction, recklessness, impairment, velocity, and escape. There's not much to say about the DS version other than it's alright. The Wii version follows a similar structure, except for gameplay. This is a much more traditional driving style game. One thing about the Wii version is that being a Wii game, it has motion controls. This time, however, they are optional. You can use the Wii Remote sideways on its own or vertically with the Wii Nunchuck. It also has multiplayer, which I've played maybe once in my entire life. Once again, all of my friends have lives and jobs. The first SpongeBob game released for Nintendo 3DS was SpongeBob SquigglePants 3D, a port of a Wii game that required the U-Draw tablet. I do not have a U-Draw tablet, nor do I desire to get one. Fortunately, the 3DS port is essentially the same game. I got the 3DS version as soon as it came out, and I loved it. SquigglePants is a WarioWare clone where you, the player, engage in dozens of microgames. Most of these use the touchscreen in a similar way you might use a mouse on a computer. Drag, flick, and draw to win these microgames. Lose too many, and it's game over. What do all of these games have in common? They were published by THQ, which went defunct in 2013. Around that same year, Activision acquired the SpongeBob video game license. Their first game was SpongeBob Plankton's Robotic Revenge for, get ready, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Wii, Wii U, DS, and 3DS. In this game, SpongeBob and co. team up to stop Plankton, who has stolen the safe containing the Krabby Patty formula. He does not have the keys, however. You need 3 keys to open the safe. SpongeBob must trek across perilous lands and fight an armada of robots in order to find the 3 keys before Plankton. Sound familiar? Robotic Revenge generated scorn and disgust when it was new. It was Activision's first SpongeBob game, and it paled in comparison to THQ's best. At a glance, it appears to advertise itself as a sequel to Battle for Bikini Bottom. Everyone remembers Plankton and his robots in that game. In practice, they bear almost no similarities. However, unlike 90% of the Western world, I don't think this is the worst game ever made. Far from it. It's a perfectly serviceable generic shoot-and-run game. I've got absolutely no incentive to go back to it after all these years, but as a kid, I was absolutely ravenous for it. You can upgrade your weapons to shoot faster or for longer. My personal favorite was the tartar sauce gun, which acted like a water gun. Once you'd upgraded it, you were practically invulnerable. I had the Wii U version growing up, and exclusive to the Wii U version was Miiverse connectivity. Miiverse was Nintendo's own little social media, and each Wii U game and some 3DS games had their own forum. Instead of a Plankton's Robotic Revenge forum, however, they actually had a generic SpongeBob forum. Most people simply talked about the game or asked for help, but many actually discussed SpongeBob the show and its episodes. Good times. Activision had one more romp in the SpongeBob world. In 2015, to coincide with the release of the SpongeBob movie Sponge Out of Water, Activision dropped quite possibly the most horrendously hilariously bad game in the franchise, SpongeBob Hero Pants. Released for the Xbox 360, PlayStation Vita, and Nintendo 3DS, gameplay is largely similar to Robotic Revenge. However, instead of the guns, they've added an invulnerability power-up. It transforms your character, be it SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, Sandy, Mr. Krabs, or Plankton, into their superpowered form from the movie. SpongeBob Hero Pants is a terrible game. I have all 3 versions. Hero Pants is missing 2 things from Robotic Revenge that made it quite a halfway decent game: weapons and stability. Without weapons, you're simply wandering your way from level to level. You can slap haphazardly around for protection, but there's nothing to it. Hero Pants is also the buggiest mess of a game I've ever played, across all 3 versions. A few years back, a friend and I played the Xbox 360 version, which has multiplayer. Double the fun is still 0 here, but at least me and Jacob got to make fun of it for around 30 minutes. SpongeBob video games took a hiatus for a few years, and Activision lost the license. Nobody has any conclusive info on when this happened, but in 2016, YouTuber Fred5107 was the first to report 2 things. First, Activision may have lost the license to SpongeBob games. He cited the radio silence of the company as well as the delisting of both their games from store platforms. Second, he reported that the newly formed THQ Nordic, established out of former Nordic games, after they acquired most of THQ Nordic's former assets, was looking to revive several THQ franchises. He predicted a remake of Battle for Bikini Bottom. Whether or not these were lucky guesses is anyone's guess, but in 2019, THQ Nordic officially announced SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. There's not a lot of info out there about the SpongeBob game license, but I can make a few educated guesses. Originally, THQ had exclusive rights to SpongeBob games, and then in 2013, Activision had exclusive rights to SpongeBob games. Around 2020, several things happened. Nickelodeon directly published SpongeBob Patty Pursuit on Apple Arcade. THQ was dead, and neither Activision nor THQ Nordic were involved in this. Other mobile games were popping up, including Krusty Cook-Off, which also got a Nintendo Switch version. Krusty Cook-Off was published by a company called Tilting Point. I'm going to guess that after the Activision fiasco, Nickelodeon did not want to lock the SpongeBob license down to one company. This is corroborated by the recent PC console release of SpongeBob the Patrick Star game, published by Outright Games. We'll get to the Patrick game in just a minute. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated came out in 2020 in the heart of COVID for pretty much every platform. I went and pre-ordered it on Amazon for the Xbox One version, and it's not my favorite. It's well made, fun, and nostalgic, but something about it keeps me from coming back. I really don't know what it is. Whatever the reason, I always find myself going back to the original 2003 version. Purple Lamp, the studio that made Rehydrated, followed it up in 2023 with SpongeBob the Cosmic Shake. Once again, I have the Xbox One version, and it plays largely the same as Battle for Bikini Bottom and its remake. In the Cosmic Shake, SpongeBob breaks the multiverse and teams up with Patrick, who's been transformed into a balloon for some reason, to save their and every world. I've played a couple hours of this one. The first world is old Western style, and I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. Unfortunately, I haven't played enough of it to go in depth, but if you liked Rehydrated, you'll probably like this. Last, but definitely not least, we have 2024's The Patrick Star Game. A physics sandbox game, Patrick sets out to live his normal day-to-day life in Bikini Bottom. You can explore town helping out the Bikini Bottomites. You can drive, flip Krabby Patties, flip Chum Burgers, go to boating school, or just be a nuisance. I've got the Switch version, and playing it on the go is a blast. A semester or two ago, I had to use the school's computer lab fairly often. Whenever I was waiting for the computer to load or upload something, I'd pull out my Switch and play the Patrick game. It was a great time killer. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today's episode of Connor Collects. Next time on the show, I'll be comparing the Wii U and Switch more in depth than I did in the last episode. I will be specifically talking about features that were tested on the Wii U that were later implemented on the Switch. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great one.